Welcome back to Snowman's Favorites, the series where we look at strong and effective builds that have become a staple in my own gameplay and ones that I've really enjoyed. Today we're looking at the two-handed sword mind over body build that has really carried some of my parties in the past and still to this day. To introduce you to the build, we used this build back in Season 2, but it is a very strong build that has carried me on legendary difficulties as well, so I highly recommend it regardless of how you play the game. There are many pros. Initially, you get some really big hits from a two-handed sword, and it's a frontliner, and you do need a lot of frontliners in your parties, so it will fill that role effectively, more than effectively. One benefit that I absolutely love about this build, and its more advanced build, because we'll have two builds today as usual, the basic build and the fancier, more refined build, is that it is a fatigue neutral build, and you never really have to worry about fatigue for the rest of your bro's life, so I really love fatigue neutral builds. The other thing that is you're allowed to use any armor with this build. It's very flexible, nimble, battle forged, medium armor, whatever you feel like your bro wants to use, whatever your bro has effective on its perks, you are able to use it with this build. There are no armor limitations. You have two area of effect options for your attacks. The two-handed sword is very flexible. You have a sweep and a split, so you can hit 3 targets in a swing or 2 targets in a line. Now, because you are fatigue neutral, you are also allowed to AoE every turn with this build, which is very strong, which allows you to top damage charts every single fight. A two-handed sword person will completely out DPS double the damage that my next best damage person is doing. Because you're able to hit multiple targets every single turn, you're able to double and triple your damage that you normally would with just a single target damaging person. So yeah, it's a very strong build. It's also strong versus most enemies in armor because they have decent armor damage, and once the armor's gone, they've just got decent health damage. They don't have the best piercing damage to go through armor, but just basic armor damage will get you very far in the game, especially when it's AoE. Now, obviously this build isn't 100% perfect. It isn't just a build that you can fill up a party for and ignore any downsides. So there are some cons. Now, the main con is this build is a one type fits one. There is only really one way to build this, and if you don't have the foundation for this build, you're kind of just gonna have to do something else. I don't recommend doing this build without the main basis for it. Even though the basis is easy to get to this build, you do need it. There is minimal customization across that, but there is ways to enhance the build per se. Once you have the foundation for what you need to make this effective, you can just start adding some nice other perks along the way. It is heavily stat reliant, so not just any bro can become a two-handed mind over body bro. You need your best of the best. They need to be good bros stat-wise, or they're just gonna become a hindrance for your party, missing all the time, dying all the time, and just struggling. So you do need really good stats, or this bro will not succeed. Now, as obvious as it is to see there, I will have to mention that there is no shield in this build, because both of your hands are on your sword, which means arrows and ranged attacks are gonna be a problem, but also it just makes the need for stats even more. You do not have a shield to compensate for bad melee defense. Your melee defense is all you got. So that is very important when trying to build these bros. Their survivability is their own, so get those stats. This two-handed sword does have an ability to break shields, but it's very weak, unreliable, and I would not say go after shields with this build or with the two-handed sword in general. It does have the ability to assist with shield breaking, but really don't rely on it. So that is another con. So let's jump into the bread and butter, the basics, just the bare bones build that gets you decently part of the way to this build being effective. As you can see, we do need 4 main stats to make this build work, so stat reliant right up front. You want a high melee attack. 85 plus is the minimum I'd say to get into this build, but always shoot for the stars, go higher. 97 is beautiful, which is what we got for this build. 3 stars gets you there. Defense, I'd say start at a 30. If you can't get past 30, start looking elsewhere. Start putting them in the back or something, or get them a shield. Because you can't wear a shield, 30 it's just a great way to start. You're just not going to survive when you're surrounded without 30 defense. Now, one thing that other builds don't use as often is a high resolve stat. So we need at least 100 resolve to at least start this build off. And we got 99 here at level 15, so we were kind of struggling on our bare bones build, but that's the idea. In a bare bones build, you're struggling, you're feeling out the build. It's not going to be perfect. And then obviously obviously you need to flesh out some HP. If you're sitting on the front line, you're struggling with some defense, anything that comes through is going to hurt. So at least 60 health, but I'd say that with a very, very minimum 60. Please go higher than 60. Now, if you have all of this quite easily and your bro is statted to the moon, once you get to these points, still max out your melee attack, melee defense. That is my suggestion. You can never have too much melee attack, never have too much melee defense. There is no cap on defense or attack, in my opinion. You're always going to need some more in some situations, in many situations. Getting that resolve above 100 is helpful in a bare bones build because we have no compensating, no fallback option like our full build will have, but as usual, just stack that HP. It's really just 4 stats. There's no other stats you need for this build, and you need them in great amounts. So focus on those stats. Once you focused on those stats, you can start going to the perks. Fortunately, you only need 2 main perks for this build to start, and they're usually pretty easy to find on most bros. You need to get Sword Mastery or Two-Handed Sword Mastery. Nowadays, it has been changed in Legends, and you need Mind Over Body. It's as simple as that. You just need 2 perks to get this build rolling. Now, the main reason why you need the Sword Mastery, obviously, is because it has fatigue reduction and it boosts your sword capabilities. And Mind Over Body, because then you can turn that resolve into a fatigue reduction again. So very, very crucial perks. Now, obviously 2 perks are not all you're going to put on a bro, so I highly suggest getting some enhancing perks for the build. The old-fashioned clarity back in the day, if you're still playing on the old versions of Legends to get an extra action point, great choice, but sadly unusable these days. I highly recommend Bloody Harvest and Sweeping Strikes. Because we're playing an AoE focused build, getting extra accuracy and damage on your AoE attacks just is a no-brainer. That is what will give this build an extra oomph. Fortified Mind and Gifted, as I said, stats are crucial, and especially Resolve is one of the hardest stats to build on any bro out there. So these 2 will get you there. Reach Advantage and Fearsome, I mean, if you're feeling adventurous, Fearsome builds, I enjoy playing around with the Resolve game, beating up enemies' morale. Reach Advantage, I wouldn't say is a compensator for bad melee defense, but it would probably boost your defense in good situations, but I wouldn't rely on it if you have bad melee defense, so don't do it for that reason. But also just get some defensives. You're sitting on the front line with no shield. You don't really need to maximize damage with this build because its damage is already phenomenal, even with no boosts to damage. Like seriously, this build will carry your teams, even if you don't have melee boosts of like Killing Frenzy, Double Strike, anything. Even if you don't get Bloody Harvest and Sweeping Strikes, this build will carry you. So that's why I say focus on the defensive. Get your Nimble, get your Steel Brow, get your Colossus. You need those stats. Get them to keep your bro alive. The longer he lives, the more he keeps swinging, the more damage he'll give your team. So that is my recommendation, even on a bear build like that. Now, what it's going to look like. You're going to be able to do single target hits or an AoE practically every turn. Because you're doing the bear build, you're only going to be having a rough 22% fatigue cost, something like that. So your fatigue's only going to be really going down to 9 on your basic 1v1 single target attack and down to 18-ish. It really depends on how good your resolve goes for your AoE attacks, either swing or split. So you're going to have minimal fatigue loss every single turn. So you're going to be able to swing a lot. You're not going to be able to swing every single turn though. We're going to build to that, but because this is a bare bones build, you're going to be able to go pretty long with the AoE attacks, which means this big damage of 100 to 120, 85 to 100 damage is going to carry through a lot. You're going to be using a lot of these attacks and you're going to be hitting for a lot of damage. And you're going to top the damage meters even if you can't AoE every single turn. Now, coupled that with high resolve and your high melee defense will give you decent to good survivability on the front lines, meaning you can pretty much look after yourself as long as you don't go 1v6 and get yourself surrounded. The sad part is you still have that shield split ability and it's still pretty bad. It does have reduced fatigue, as you can see, down to 16 there, which is pretty decent, but in emergencies it's okay. The bare bones is quite effective, but we can improve this build, surprisingly. We can make this build even better. And this is where I bring you to the completed build. The Two-Handed Sword Mind Over Body completed build is still the same. It needs 4 main stats. It is very stat reliant. With this build, we got ourselves up to 97 melee attack, 41 melee defense. I still recommend 85, 30 plus. Differently now, I only recommend 90 plus resolve. For the full build, you need less resolve. Now, I'll explain why in a moment. You still need at least 60 plus health. As usual, still shoot for the stars, but But don't shoot for the stars with the resolve. You want to max your melee defense and your melee attack. The resolve, you don't really need to. It can help, but I'd say go for the HP instead, because we're going to be using a brand new perk that makes sure we don't have to worry about our resolve and our fatigue ever again. So what's new? We have one more major perk that is guaranteed to be a foundational perk for this build. We still need the sword mastery, as stated before. We still need the mind of our body, but our new perk today is Rebound. Rebound is a glorious perk in Legends. Really gives you so many fatigue neutral builds, and it is one of my favorite perks for that reason. Oh, as well, you know, mind of our body is a really good perk as well. But now with the ability of Rebound, we can now deal with fatigue up to 20, because you will get up to 20 fatigue per turn when you are stammed out. So you don't have to get down to like 17. You don't have to get down to 16 or 15 fatigue for your abilities. You just have to get to 20, which is why our resolve is now capped out at 90. You don't need to get higher than 90. You still have a lot of flexibility with this build. As usual, I say go for the Fortified and Mind and Gifted. Get you to that stat of 90 very early, which gives you more flexibility for your health. Or if you want to even go higher than 90, it gives you a little bit of a cushion for getting like a broken nose, but you don't have to go above 90. It's just a cushion in case. Reach advantage and fearsome, just if you're having fun, you want to go for that resolve game, if you want to go for some reach advantage for a little bit more extra melee defense. I don't strongly recommend this, but it is a suggestion if you want to play around with things. Bloody Harvest Sweeping Strikes is a no-brainer as usual. Great strength for this build. But as you can see, this bro that we had, we didn't get the Sweeping Strikes on it or the Bloody Harvest because we went with a few more defensives. We went with Double Strike because it was really strong back in the day, and Clarity because we love the action point. So I highly recommend Bloody Harvest and Sweeping Strikes, but sometimes defensives are just needed. They're just better. Old Clarity, as I said, with the action point was great back in the day, but it's defensives. Like, you don't need more damage because your weapon will do the talking. Now, this results with the rebound and extra fatigue. You still will get a single hit every turn, but you can also AoE every turn. We went a bit over and beyond for our resolve for this build because we were still testing it out and making sure we could capitalize it. We got to 26% mind over body, which means our fatigue went down to 17. Now, we were guaranteed to get 20 fatigue every single turn, which means even with a broken nose, we were getting 17 fatigue every turn, which means no matter how bad our bro practically got, there was an ability for us to do an AoE every single turn, as long as you didn't move on the battlefield. But if you want to move and do your AoE, we could still do it even without a broken nose. So that's why I say you can go above that 90 because it allows you to walk around the battlefield and swing. You can still swing in a landlocked battle every single turn with 90 resolve, but going above isn't the worst thing in the world. So there's literally no fatigue loss we would have in this situation, and Rebound really capitalized on the top of the mind over body reductions. We still did big damage. We got a rune on our weapons, so obviously you can see the damages are a little bit higher with a boost, but the fact that you can do triple this damage, double this damage every single turn is disgusting. Like, there's a reason why you top the damage meters with this build, because it's just consistent. And with the high resolve, the high melee defense, even at just a base 90 resolve, that is higher than most bros will ever get. And on the front lines, you're barely going to get morale check. Barely. And you're going to get confident really easy, pretty easily. So survivability on the front lines is going to be wonderful. As usual, your bad shield damage is a problem. It down to 15 fatigue is still good if you ever need to help with it against like trees, shrats, whatever, but it's just there for an emergency. So I don't really highly recommend it. The best part is this is a fatigue neutral build that is super consistent. What is not to love? I highly recommend this build for one of your bros, at least one of your bros in every single party. You will see the true difference it makes to your party and the damage and the amount of kills you can get. It can hold a flank practically on its own. And to finish off on this explanation of the build, people always like saying that axe builds, people who can swing in a circle like two-handed flails, those are the top damage of the game because you're hitting 6 targets at once being surrounded. But realistically, you're going to have bros around you on your shield walls. You're going to have friends around. You're going to have many, many moments where swinging in a circle is bad. And to be able to capitalize on 6 enemies surrounding you, you're probably going to die before you get your best hits off. The swinging 3 targets in a row, the splitting of 2 targets in a line is so much more versatile. You will use it so many more times in battle, and it's going to just get you to that high DPS more than an axe bro will. I know it's a controversial take, but I stand by it. That the two-handed sword is the most efficient and flexible AoE build in the game, and when you couple it with mind over body and rebound, you're able to just swing through everything every turn. Unfortunately, the auto for these clips went missing and is not recoverable, But here are some nice clips that we have of our just bare bones build being able to walk around the battlefield quite effectively, able to hit really strong on all of these opponents, and get a lot of splits and sweeps. Very, very nice. Topping damage, as you can see there. Yeah, just proving to be quite an effective killer across a wide range of enemies, and just clear up the battlefield. Very helpful indeed. So hopefully this can show you the effectiveness. Make sure you see it in your own games as well. As you can see there, yes, there is no sweep that could be done, so you can't do it every turn, so you will have to walk around and have decisions. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed the build. I hope that you guys are going to able to make your party stronger and more flexible with a two-handed sword in your teams. Please try it out for yourself and you'll see the wonders that I'm talking about. Even if you can just do a bare bones, even if it's just the first build, at least get those 2 perks and start playing from there. Try out your own little iterations of the build, but I highly recommend getting Rebound on top of it. It will make a world of difference. Anyways, that's all from me today. Hope you enjoyed today's favorites, and we'll catch you in the next one. See yous.